At 7:14 on a warm Thursday night in Pasadena, when the jacaranda blooms had already started dropping purple bruises across the sidewalks and the city council chamber still smelled faintly of old carpet, lemon polish, and stale coffee, Elise Carter watched her husband kiss another woman on a 20-foot projection screen while half the room forgot how to breathe. The video had no sound at first, just Noah Carter, candidate for county supervisor, the son-in-law of one of the wealthiest developers in Southern California, standing under the discreet yellow light of the Fairmont's underground parking garage, with one hand on the waist of a woman nobody in that room recognized right away. Then the woman tilted her face, and the image sharpened as if the universe itself enjoyed cruelty. Monica Vale, campaign treasurer, married, 42, sharp enough to gut a man with one sentence and smile while he bled. Somebody in the audience made a short choking noise. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Elise did not move. She stood near the back wall in a cream blouse she had ironed herself that morning. One hand wrapped around the strap of her handbag so tightly the leather edge pressed a deep red line into her palm. She could hear the projector fan. She could hear a chair leg scrape. She could hear Noah say, from the podium where he had been giving a speech about ethics and zoning reform, "Turn that off." But even before the sound kicked in, she knew exactly what she was looking at. Women always knew before the proof arrived. The proof was only for other people. Then the audio popped alive. Static first. Traffic humming somewhere beyond concrete. Monica laughing softly. Noah saying, "You worry too much." The room turned from shock to ravenous in 1 second flat. Elise felt it happen like a weather change. Reporters lifted their phones. A planning commissioner lowered his eyes and pretended to be embarrassed while clearly listening harder. Councilwoman Ramirez, who had hated Noah for 2 years and smiled at him anyway, leaned back in her chair with the stillness of a woman who knew a gift had just been delivered to her doorstep. On the screen, Noah reached for Monica again, and Monica said, "After the hearing Friday, we need to talk about the trust." That word cut through Elise harder than the kiss. The trust. Not just sex, money, family money, old money wrapped in legal language and blood obligation. A long second passed before Elise realized she had stopped blinking. Her mother-in-law, Vivian Carter, was seated in the front row directly beneath the screen. 71 years old, white silk shell, diamond studs, spine straight as a blade. She did not gasp. She did not turn around. She only lifted one manicured hand and adjusted the pearl bracelet at her wrist, which was how Vivian showed anger in public. Noah stepped away from the podium now, his face gone from campaign warmth to naked fury. "This is a fabrication," he said. "Too fast. Bad move." Elise could hear the greed in the room deepen. People loved scandal, but they loved clumsy lies even more. "That's the Fairmont garage on Colorado," a voice called from somewhere in the middle rows. "That's not AI, Noah," another voice said. Laughter, low and vicious, traveled along the chamber walls. The mayor banged his gavel, but it only made the moment sound official. Elise finally looked away from the screen and at her husband. He was handsome in the polished American way that looked easy until you realized how much maintenance it took. Navy suit, perfect teeth, campaign haircut, the Carter confidence. But now there was sweat beginning at his temples, and his eyes were already searching the room not for truth, not for apology, but for control. When they found Elise, he froze. Just for a second, long enough for her to see calculation arrive behind the panic. Later he would tell her there was context. Later he would say Monica had manipulated things. Later he would say the trust reference was innocent, business-related, misunderstood. But a marriage did not die in the moment of betrayal. It died in the moment one spouse looked at the other and chose strategy over grief. Elise knew it as clearly as she knew her own name. Council security finally cut the projector. The blank screen glowed pale above the dais like a sheet over a body. Noise rose at once. Reporters crowded forward. Noah's campaign manager shoved toward the podium. Vivian stood, calm and terrible, and turned at last to face the room. "This hearing is adjourned," she said, though she had no authority to say it. The strange thing was, for 2 full beats, everyone obeyed her voice anyway. That was power in Los Angeles County real estate. That was Carter power. Elise still said nothing. Her silence felt bigger than if she had screamed. She walked down the center aisle while people moved out of her way. She passed Noah without touching him. Up close, she caught the scent of his cologne beneath the sweat, cedar and bergamot, the smell that used to cling to her pillow when he came home late and slid into bed whispering excuses she had once accepted because they fit the life they lived. "Elise," he said under his breath. She kept walking. Outside, the night air hit her with exhaust, cut grass, and the sweet rot of summer flowers. Camera lights flared immediately. Somebody shouted, "Missus, Carter, did you know about the affair?" Another voice yelled, "Is this tied to the Hollinger land vote?" Elise stopped halfway down the Civic Center steps. That second question mattered. More than the affair, maybe. Hollinger, 300 acres on the east edge of the city. Dry, ugly, golden land that looked worthless unless you understood future freeway plans, water access, and how rich people made entire neighborhoods appear where scrub and dust used to be. The Carter family business, Carter Horizons, had been trying to acquire the last parcels for 18 months. There had been resistance, lawsuits, holdouts, noise from environmental groups, and now a campaign treasurer caught whispering about the family trust in a hotel garage. Elise turned toward the cameras. She could feel all of Pasadena pause with her. Across the street, two teenagers were pretending not to stare while openly staring. A bus exhaled at the curb. Somewhere above, a helicopter pushed through the dark. "No comment," she said, but her voice came out so steady, so cold, that the words sounded less like retreat and more like a promise. Then she got into her own car, not the campaign SUV, and drove west with both hands fixed on the wheel. She did not cry on the drive. She noticed the details instead, because that was what her mind did under threat. The red neon of a liquor store sign flickering near Eagle Rock, a couple fighting outside a taco stand, a man jogging with his dog under streetlights that flattened everything into silver and black. American life moving forward, ordinary and indifferent, while hers split open. She took the Colorado Bridge too fast and did not care. Her phone began buzzing before she hit Highland Park. First her sister Mara, then 3 friends, then 2 unknown numbers, then Vivian. That one she let ring until it stopped. When she reached the house in San Marino, every downstairs light was on, turning the windows into bright rectangular accusations against the dark lawn. The place had never felt like hers. It was beautiful in the curated, expensive way magazines called timeless. Spanish Revival, ironwork gates, interior arches, a kitchen that looked designed for a family that actually ate together. Vivian had found it. Vivian had negotiated the price. Vivian had sent decorators. Elise had lived there for 12 years like a very successful tenant. She parked, sat in silence for 10 seconds, then went inside through the mudroom instead of the front door because she could not bear the performance of a grand entrance. The house smelled like beeswax, basil from the kitchen windowsill, and the ghost of whatever expensive candle the housekeeper lit before guests came over. From the den, she heard the television already replaying the footage. "Oh, that's sick," said a male anchor with delighted restraint. Elise slipped off her heels and carried them in one hand. Her son Ben was 17 and supposed to be at water polo practice until 9, but he was standing in the den doorway in socks and gym shorts with his phone in his hand and his face white with fury. "Tell me it's fake," he said. "No hello. No mom. Just the demand children made when they wanted a parent to preserve the architecture of their world." Elise set her shoes down carefully on the console table. "I can't tell you that." Ben swallowed once. He had Noah's height already, but not his polish. Not yet. He still wore anger honestly. "Dad texted me not to look online," he said. "So obviously I looked online." He laughed, but there was nothing young in it. Everybody has it. Everybody. From the breakfast room beyond him came the sound of a chair scraping tile. Their daughter, Tessa, 14, appeared with mascara half wiped beneath one eye and a blanket around her shoulders even though it wasn't cold. "I hate him," she said immediately. Elise turned to her, but Tessa looked past her, toward the television, where Noah and Monica were frozen in one humiliating frame. "I hate him so much." Elise crossed the room. Tessa did not move until Elise wrapped her arms around her, and then the girl folded with a sudden, shaking force that almost took them both down. Ben looked away. Through the wall-mounted TV came a legal analyst speculating about campaign finance exposure, misuse of donor funds, conflicts of interest, and whether the mention of the trust pointed to an undeclared asset transfer. That got Ben's attention. "What trust?" he asked. Elise held Tessa and stared over her daughter's shoulder at the polished dark reflection of the window. There were several trusts, of course. The Children's Educational Trust, the Charitable Foundation, the main family trust controlled by Vivian, which held voting rights in Carter Horizons, and enough real estate to decide elections in 3 municipalities without ever appearing on a ballot. Noah was a beneficiary, not a controller. Elise was not even that. She was a spouse. A useful legal attachment. "I don't know yet," she said. And for the first time that night, those words were true. At 8:03, the front door opened. Noah did not call out. He knew better than to perform normalcy in a house that had just watched him detonate it. Elise straightened slowly, one hand still on Tessa's shoulder. Ben stepped fully into the room now, shoulders squared in a stance so like his grandfather's that it startled Elise. even though Ben had never met the man old enough to remember. Noah came into view without his tie, carrying his suit jacket in one hand and his phone in the other, still lit with incoming messages. He stopped when he saw all three of them together. The silence that followed had texture. Thick, airless, the kind that made the hum of the refrigerator sound invasive. "Kids," Noah began. "Don't," Ben said. Noah looked at Elise. "Please tell them to give us a minute." Elise almost laughed at the instinct buried in that sentence, the ancient assumption that she would manage the emotional mess while he handled the narrative. "No," she said. Noah set his jacket down on a chair and rubbed his face. He was choosing a version of himself now. Contrite husband? Wronged man? Patriarch under siege? "What you saw," he said, "was real, but it isn't what it looks like." Tessa made a disgusted sound and turned away. Ben said, "That's literally the dumbest sentence you could say right now." Noah flinched. "Good," Elise thought distantly. "Let him feel one corner of it." "Monica and I made a mistake," he said. "A mistake?" Tessa snapped around, blanket sliding off one shoulder. "You were making out in a parking garage, not buying the wrong cereal." Noah's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to be honest." "No," Elise said quietly. "You're trying to get ahead of the next revelation." He stared at her, and she watched him understand that she already knew this was bigger than sex. "What does she know?" Ben asked, immediately alert. "Smart boy." Noah ignored him. "Elise, we should do this privately. The private part is over." She stepped closer, enough to see the bloodshot lines in his eyes. Why did Monica mention the trust? For the first time that evening, genuine uncertainty crossed his face. Not guilt, not shame, fear. He recovered fast, but not fast enough. Ben saw it too. Elise knew because she heard her son's breath catch. Noah said, "It was campaign-related." She was worried about opposition research getting confused by routine transfers. "Routine transfers from which trust?" Elise asked. "And why would the campaign treasurer be discussing them in a hotel garage after 10 p.m.? Noah's voice sharpened. "Because unlike everybody else in this family, Monica actually helps me." The room went still. He had not meant to say it. That was obvious. But truth had a way of slipping out when a man got cornered in his own kitchen. Tessa started crying again, not loudly this time, just silently, as if some remaining piece of childish hope had finished breaking. Ben said, "Very calm now. Get out." Noah turned to him. "This is my house." "No," Ben said, looking straight at him. "It's Grandma Vivian's house. Everything's Grandma Vivian's house." Noah's face hardened. Elise saw the wound hit home. Inheritance was the hidden nervous system of the Carter family. Every fight eventually touched it. Every affection had paperwork beneath it. Noah opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Elise's phone lit on the console table. Vivian Carter, calling again. All four of them looked at it. The screen glowed in the dim room like an order. Elise let it ring 3 times, then answered and put it on speaker. "Elise," Vivian said. Her voice was crisp enough to cut glass. "Where is my son?" Noah reached for the phone, but Elise picked it up first. "In the den," she said. "Lying." A tiny pause. Then Vivian said, "Good. Bring him to my house. Now. And bring the children upstairs. They shouldn't hear what comes next." Ben gave a short, bitter laugh. "Too late for that." Vivian did not acknowledge him. "Now, Noah." There was no tenderness in her tone, only command. And beneath it, something Elise had heard maybe twice in 12 years. Alarm. Real alarm. Noah took the phone at last. "Mother, not tonight." Vivian's answer came low and lethal. "Tonight exactly. Because if you don't walk into my library in the next 30 minutes and explain why Monica Vale has been accessing trust summaries she should never have seen, I will assume the district attorney needs to hear my concerns before sunrise." That landed like a gunshot. Ben stared at his father. Tessa's crying stopped from sheer confusion. Elise felt the floor of the evening drop another level beneath them. District attorney. Not divorce lawyer. Not crisis consultant. District attorney. Noah went pale in a way no public embarrassment had managed to make him. "Don't do this on speaker," he said. Vivian replied. "Then you should have chosen a different family to humiliate." And the line went dead. For a moment, nobody moved. In the den, the television anchor was now using phrases like widening scandal and possible financial misconduct. Outside, sprinklers clicked on across the lawn, that soft, repetitive tick-tick-tick of suburban wealth maintaining itself in the dark while families came apart inside. Elise looked at her husband, and in that instant something inside her settled into a colder, sharper shape than grief. An affair could be survived or not survived. People lied. Marriages cracked. But hidden trust documents, campaign money, and a mother threatening prosecutors meant this night was not the collapse of one relationship. It was the opening scene of a war. "Go," she said. Noah stared at her as if he still expected some softness to appear. It did not. "Elise, go to your mother's house." She lowered her voice. "And while you're there, ask yourself which story is going to destroy you first." He left 5 seconds later without another word. The front door shut. The house settled. Tessa sank onto the sofa, dazed. Ben stood rigid, hands clasped behind his head. Elise looked toward the dark hallway leading to the study Noah used when he worked from home. The room he always kept locked, even though he said it was just for privacy during donor calls. She could hear her own pulse now, steady and deliberate. Somewhere in that room, maybe in a desk drawer, maybe on a hard drive, maybe in printed files hidden in plain sight, there would be the beginning of an answer. And if Vivian Carter was scared enough to threaten her own son, the answer would not stay buried for long. Elise picked up her shoes again, set them aside for good, and walked barefoot toward the study door while her children watched her go. The brass handle was cool under her hand, and for one irrational second, Elise thought about all the ordinary times she had passed this door, carrying folded laundry or a cup of coffee or a list of schools Tessa wanted to tour, never once imagining that the room on the other side might be less a workspace than a vault. The study was locked. Of course it was. She stood there barefoot on the hardwood, feeling the grain and dust beneath her soles, while the house hummed softly around her. Behind her, from the den, came the low, uneven rhythm of Tessa, breathing through the remnants of tears, and the hollow tap of Ben, setting his phone face down on the coffee table, as if by not looking at it he could slow the spread of whatever disaster was already multiplying in group chats, on local news feeds, in campaign texts, across private school parent circles and donor lists and the private dining rooms where people with money pretended their gossip had civic purpose. Elise curled her fingers tighter around the handle, then let go. "Mom?" Ben called. She turned her head slightly. "Do you know the code?" He was trying to sound useful instead of scared. It broke her heart a little that he had already learned the American family trick of converting pain into problem-solving. "No," she said. "But your father is predictable." She went to the kitchen, opened the drawer where spare keys, batteries, expired coupons, and 3 different tape measures lived in a false democracy of household order, and she found the slim steel lock key set Noah had bought years ago, after he got fascinated with home preparedness for about 2 weekends. Her hands were steady. That steadiness frightened her more than shaking would have. It meant the panic had burned through and left something harder behind. Tessa appeared in the archway, blanket clutched at her throat. "Are we allowed to do this?" she asked. The question was so young and so old at the same time. Allowed, as if permission still lived anywhere in this house. Elise slid one pick into the lock and listened to the tiny, resistant clicks. "Tonight," she said, eyes on the door, "we are done asking what we're allowed to know." The lock gave on the 4th try. She pushed the door inward with 2 fingers. The study smelled like leather, printer toner, cedar from the built-ins, and Noah's cologne fading into stale air. A banker's lamp cast a cone of amber light across the desk. He had left in a hurry earlier, or maybe he had not expected anyone to challenge the private geometry of his life. A legal pad lay open with 3 names written on it and underlined twice. Finch, Monica, Ramirez. Beside it sat a crystal tumbler, with a finger of whiskey gone watery from melted ice. On the bookshelf were biographies of presidents Noah quoted, but had clearly never finished. Reports on regional transportation planning, zoning handbooks, a framed photo of him and Elise at Catalina from the year before everything in him turned polished and distant, and a silver bowl filled with campaign buttons like candy. Ben came up behind her and stopped at the threshold. "Jesus," he muttered, not at the room itself but at the feeling of entering a place that had always belonged to his father's mind. Tessa stayed farther back, as if the carpet itself might accuse her. Elise walked to the desk. The drawers were locked too. She hated the thrill she felt at that confirmation. It made the room honest. Secrets announced themselves through hardware. She tried the center drawer first, then the right. Nothing. Then she crouched and checked beneath the desk lip, running her fingers along the smooth wood until she found a magnetized spare key taped out of sight. Noah had been a Boy Scout at 10 and had never emotionally recovered from the belief that hiding something well counted as virtue. The drawer opened. Inside were the usual things arranged with almost comical neatness. Fountain pens, stapler, envelopes, chargers, a sealed packet of donor briefing notes. Under those sat a manila folder marked only with the letter H. Hollinger, she thought immediately. Or maybe Hollis. Or Helen. But when she lifted it, its weight said paperwork, not romance. She placed it on the desk and opened it. Parcel maps. Water District correspondence. Copies of emails between Noah and Monica. A draft memo about beneficial ownership disclosure requirements. One page had a list of LLC names that meant nothing on first read and everything on second. Arroyo Vista Holdings, Sierra Crest Development, Marigold Basin Ventures, Shells, Layering, Proxies, not illegal by themselves, but rarely innocent when they appeared in clusters around a contested land deal. Ben came close enough now to read over her shoulder. What is that? Elise exhaled slowly through her nose. Entities, she said. Ways to buy something without putting your real name on it. Like a front? Sometimes. She kept turning pages. There, halfway down the stack, was a draft purchase agreement for 2 of the remaining Hollinger parcels. The buyer name was Arroyo Vista Holdings. The signature line for seller's counsel was blank. Attached to it was a confidential note from Monica to Noah. Use family trust as silent guarantor. Keep VC out until after entitlement vote. Elise stared at the initials. VC. Vivian Carter. Not told until after the vote, so Vivian's panic made sense now, but only partly. If Noah and Monica had tried to pledge trust assets without Vivian's knowledge, that was not just marital betrayal or political stupidity, that was war inside the bloodline. Ben read the note, then looked at his mother with a face suddenly older than 17. Can Grandma really send him to prison? I don't know yet. Do you want her to? The question landed in the room and stayed there. Elise set the page down carefully. She thought of Noah 20 years ago in a downtown bar with his jacket slung over one shoulder, smiling like he had not yet learned to divide people into assets and obstacles. She thought of the first apartment they rented in Los Feliz, how he used to make pasta at midnight and dance with her while water boiled over. She thought of the years when every compromise seemed temporary, strategic, survivable. Then she thought of Monica's voice on that video saying, after the hearing Friday, we need to talk about the trust, and of Noah's instinct tonight, not to confess, but to manage. I don't know what I want, she said finally. I know I want the truth before everybody else decides what it is. Tessa drifted closer, her blanket trailing over the rug. What if Dad didn't do it? She said. But there was no conviction in it. It was not faith. It was bargaining with reality. Elise looked at her daughter's thin fingers knotted in the fabric, the bitten thumbnail, the bruise on one shin from soccer practice. Small, painfully human details, the kind that made adult deceit feel monstrous in scale. Then we find that out too, Elise said. She reached for Noah's laptop. It was asleep, not shut down. Another careless gift from a man split between arrogance and panic. The password screen glowed. Ben said, "Try my birthday." Elise did. Wrong. Tessa's? Wrong. Their anniversary? Tessa asked, voice flat. Elise entered the date of their wedding. Also wrong. That hurt more than it should have. She tried Hollinger. No. Carter 2024. No. Then a thought, ugly and simple. Monica, with the year they met. The laptop opened. Ben swore under his breath. Tessa turned away. Elise felt not vindication, but a wave of disgust so physical it tightened the back of her throat. On the desktop sat folders labeled Campaign, Donors, Personal, and one innocuous folder called Tax Backup. She clicked Tax Backup. Inside were scanned returns, insurance summaries, and beneath those a subfolder named Archive 2. Inside Archive 2 were audio files, grainy PDFs, and a spreadsheet tracking dates, initials, payment amounts, and what looked like parcel references. Why would there be audio files? Ben asked. Elise clicked the first one. A voice filled the room at low volume, slightly muffled, as if recorded from inside a jacket pocket. Male. Mid-50s. Irritated. I already told you, the Easley family wants another 80 grand, or they'll drag it through the environmental review. Then, Noah's voice, unmistakable, calm. Not 80, 50 and the consulting contract. The first man again. Same difference. Static. Car door. End of file. Ben looked sick. What the hell is that? A conversation somebody wasn't supposed to record, Elise said. She clicked another. This one was Monica. If Vivian sees the guarantor language before the hearing, she'll kill it, Noah replied. Then she won't see it. Monica laughed once, but there was strain in it. You say that like she isn't already reading everything. Elise stopped the audio. The room felt smaller now, the amber lamplight dirtier somehow. These weren't love notes. They were leverage, insurance, a private archive of conversations that could destroy allies, opponents, maybe Noah himself. She opened the spreadsheet. Columns, dates, names reduced to initials, CC hearing, planning vote, Easley settlement, M. V. Transfer, Finch retainer. Who's Finch? Ben asked. Elise thought of the notepad again. Finch underlined twice. A lawyer, maybe. Or a fixer who pretends not to be one. Her phone buzzed with Mara at last, then again, with a text from an unknown number. She ignored both. Another buzz. Vivian. This time, a text. Come to the house. Alone if possible. Elise read it twice. Not please, not can you. A summons dressed as efficiency. Ben saw her expression. What does she want? She wants to control the blast radius. That means it's bad, right? Ben asked. If Grandma's scared, it's bad. Tessa sank onto the leather sofa under the window, folding the blanket tighter around herself. Outside, the lawn lights cast pale coins across the grass. A coyote barked somewhere distant, that eerie, sharp yip of a city, still pretending it had wilderness at its edges. I don't want to stay here, Tessa whispered. Elise crossed to her and touched the top of her daughter's head. Her hair smelled like shampoo and chlorine from an afternoon shower, taken before the whole world tilted. You won't be alone, she said. Mara can come, or you can both go to her place. Ben stiffened immediately. I'm not leaving. He looked around the study as if the walls themselves had challenged him. If Dad comes back and starts taking stuff, he won't, tonight, Elise said, though she was no longer sure of anything Noah would or would not do under pressure. She closed the laptop but did not shut it down. Then she gathered the folder, snapped photos of the spreadsheet, and the note from Monica, using her phone, and emailed the images to an account Noah did not know she still used, one from before marriage, before campaigns, before she let herself become administratively visible and strategically invisible at the same time. The tiny whoosh of the sent message felt more intimate than revenge. It felt like self-rescue. Ben watched every step. Mom, he said after a moment, quieter now. Was Dad always like this? She almost answered too quickly, almost gave him the easy cruelty of hindsight. But honesty required more discipline than rage. She leaned against the desk and looked at her son's face, his need to know whether corruption had been hiding in his father all along, or whether people became this by inches, while families called it ambition. Not always, she said, but there were signs I chose to explain away, because our life worked better when I did. Ben looked down. That sucks. Yes. That's not, like, on you, right? The question was awkward, earnest, American in the way children now spoke half in therapy language and half in plain pain. Elise's mouth trembled despite herself. Some of it is, not what he did, but what I ignored, Tessa said from the sofa. Can adults stop saying things are complicated when they mean they were scared? Elise turned. The girl's eyes were swollen, but they were clear. There it was, the ruthless moral intelligence of the young. She walked over and knelt in front of her daughter. Yes, she said, I was scared. Scared of blowing up the family. Scared of being wrong. Scared of what we would lose. Tessa held her gaze. And now we lose it anyway. Elise nodded once. There was no lie available. The doorbell rang. All three of them flinched. At this hour, every sound had become a threat. Ben moved first toward the hallway, shoulders tense, but Elise raised a hand to stop him. She checked the camera feed on her phone. Mara, in jeans and a UCLA hoodie, dark hair tied up, jaw already set for battle. Relief moved through Elise so fast it left a hollow ache behind. She opened the door, and her sister came in carrying no overnight bag, no casserole, no polite fiction, just her car keys and fury. Tell me where the bastard is, Mara said. Then she saw the children and moderated half a degree. Hi, babies. Tessa broke first and crossed the foyer in 3 quick steps to hug her aunt. Ben followed more slowly, but when Mara wrapped one arm around him too, his face folded for a second against her shoulder, before he got himself back under control. Mara met Elise's eyes over their heads. You okay? Elise gave a small laugh at the absurdity of the question, and then nearly cried because it was the first kind thing anyone had asked that night, without also wanting information. No, she said. Good, Mara replied. Anybody telling the truth tonight should start there. 15 minutes later, with Mara installed in the kitchen like a civilian general taking control of a collapsing state, making tea no one wanted, and charging everyone's phones and ordering Ben to mute notifications. He was too angry to stop reading. Elise stood in the front hall with her purse over one shoulder and the manila folder tucked inside. She had changed into flats and a dark coat, though the night was still warm. Armor was often symbolic. Mara leaned against the staircase banister, arms crossed. You should not go there alone. Vivian asked me to. Vivian asks for weather when she means obedience. Elise almost smiled. I know. Mara stepped closer. Then don't walk in there like a daughter-in-law waiting to be managed. Walk in like the woman who may currently possess the only copies of documents everybody in that family wants. Elise looked at her sister, at the blunt love in her face, and felt something click into place. Not confidence, something leaner. Readiness. "Lock the doors," she said. "Don't let Noah in unless I call," Ben immediately said. "Done." Tessa, from the breakfast nook, whispered, "Please don't let Dad take anything." Mara answered for her. "He won't." Outside, the air had cooled just enough to smell of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine drifting over someone else's wall. Elise drove through streets lined with old money and strategic darkness, past houses with uplighting on olive trees and security plaques mounted beside gates, past quiet intersections where stop signs glowed red in the emptiness. At a red light on Lombardy, she checked her phone at last and opened the unknown text. It contained only a single sentence from a blocked number. "Ask Vivian where Daniel Price is buried before she starts pretending this is about ethics." Elise stared at the words until the light turned green and a horn sounded behind her. Daniel Price. She knew the name vaguely. Not friend, not relative. A ghost attached to old stories about a land broker who had disappeared from Carter Horizons years ago after a dispute no one discussed at dinner. Buried. Maybe metaphor. Maybe not. Her pulse climbed anyway. This was how power protected itself in families like the Carters. Affairs as distraction, scandals layered over older scandals, moral outrage used to contain logistical risk. By the time she turned into Vivian's circular drive, the mansion stood at the end of it like a white-lit courthouse, every window awake. Noah's car was there. So was Monica's black Mercedes. Elise sat for one beat with the engine idling, listening to it tick, smelling hot metal and leather and the faint trace of her own perfume from earlier in the day, a woman from another life who had left the house expecting a routine hearing, and now arrived carrying evidence into the heart of a dynasty. Then she killed the engine, took the folder, and stepped out into the bright, watchful dark. The front door opened before she could reach for the bell, as if someone had been watching the camera feed and counting the seconds between her footsteps on the stone path. Vivian's house manager, Elena, stood there in a navy dress with her silver hair pinned back and her face arranged into the careful blankness of a woman who had worked too many years for rich people to pretend she did not understand catastrophe when it walked in carrying a handbag. "Mrs. Carter," she said, then corrected herself with the slightest hesitation. "Elise, they're in the library." Elise stepped inside. The entry hall smelled of lilies, furniture wax, and the faint mineral coolness of stone floors that never fully warmed. Somewhere deeper in the house, an antique clock chimed the quarter hour, each note soft and expensive. Her flats heard almost no sound on the runner, but she felt each step through her legs, a measured approach toward a room where every relationship in her adult life might be reclassified in under an hour. At the library doors, she paused long enough to hear voices within. Noah, low and clipped. Monica, sharper, trying and failing to sound calm. Vivian, not loud at all, which was worse. Elise put her hand on the brass plate, pushed one door open, and entered. The room looked exactly as it always had, and that steadiness felt almost obscene. Walnut shelves, oil portraits of long-dead Carters whose fortunes had started in citrus and multiplied in asphalt. Two green-shaded lamps throwing pools of light across Persian rugs dark as dried wine. A decanter on the sideboard untouched. Vivian stood beside the fireplace in a pale gray suit that made her look less like a mother and more like the senior partner in a firm that had just discovered embezzlement. Noah was near the windows, tie gone, sleeves rolled once, his posture rigid with contained rage. Monica sat on the leather sofa, knees together, one heel bouncing almost invisibly against the rug. She wore the same black dress from the council hearing, but the confidence that usually seemed sewn into her clothes had split at the seams. For 1 second, all three of them looked at Elise's purse, which was enough to tell her they already suspected she had not come empty-handed. Vivian spoke first. "Close the door," Elise did. "Sit down," Vivian added. "I'd rather stand." Vivian's mouth tightened, not quite displeased. Noah took a step forward. "What did you bring?" Elise looked at him. "You don't get to ask me questions first." Monica exhaled through her nose and rose from the sofa. "This is getting out of control." Vivian turned her head very slowly toward her. "You lost the right to assess control when you left a hotel garage on camera." Monica's cheeks flared with color. "I didn't plant that video." "No," Vivian said. "You were merely in it." Elise stayed near the door, one hand resting lightly on the strap over her shoulder. She could feel the folder inside against her ribs like a hard second spine. "I got a text on the way over," she said. "It said I should ask Vivian where Daniel Price is buried before anybody starts pretending this is about ethics." That was the closest thing to dropping a grenade she had ever done in her life, and the effect was immediate. Monica's face went blank in pure self-protection. Noah swore under his breath. Vivian did not move, but something in her eyes withdrew behind glass. Elise felt the silence change temperature. Who sent that? Noah demanded. Blocked number. Show me. No. Noah took another step. Elise, for God's sake. For God's sake what? She shot back. Trust you? The word hit harder than she expected. Trust. The entire night seemed organized around it now. Around all the ways it could mean affection, money, legal structure, or the fatal confusion of the three. Vivian crossed to a side table, lifted a pair of reading glasses, then put them back down without wearing them. A stall tactic. Elise had learned the tells of this family the way some women learned a second language. Daniel Price, Vivian said at last, is not buried anywhere. He lives in Santa Fe, unless he's moved again. He was a land broker who breached a confidentiality agreement 19 years ago and was bought out. People enjoy melodrama when money is involved. Noah made a sound halfway between relief and annoyance. Monica did not look relieved. Elise noticed. Then why did that name bother all of you? She asked. Vivian met her eyes. Because old accusations are useful when new ones appear. Not an answer, Elise thought. Not really, but she let it stand for the moment and opened her purse. Noah's shoulders tensed. Monica went still. Elise withdrew the manila folder, set it on the edge of Vivian's desk, and watched the room's center of gravity shift toward paper. I was in Noah's study, she said. I found documents about Hollinger, shell companies, draft guarantor language, audio recordings, a note from Monica saying to keep you out until after the entitlement vote. She looked at Vivian. So let's stop wasting time. What exactly was he trying to do with the trust? Noah moved first, hand out. Give me that. Elise put her palm flat over the folder and stared at him until he stopped. The old reflex in him, she saw, had still been to seize, contain, redirect. It startled him that she no longer responded like someone inside his management zone. Monica spoke before Vivian could. He wasn't stealing from the family trust. Careful, Vivian said. Monica ignored her. The issue was collateral structure. We needed to bridge 2 parcel acquisitions before Friday's hearing, because once Ramirez delayed the vote again, the sellers were going to walk and take a higher offer from a private equity group out of Phoenix. Noah thought if he could lock the parcels quietly, Carter Horizons could protect the master plan. Elise let the explanation unspool. It was competent, plausible, also missing the moral center by several counties. Without telling Vivian, because Vivian kills anything she didn't design herself, Monica snapped. And because if the board saw the ownership chain before entitlement, there would have been disclosure requirements, donor questions, and a pile of headlines about insider influence whether or not any crime existed. Noah jumped in now, hearing terrain he understood. It was a defensive move, not looting, not fraud. We were trying to prevent the project from getting carved up by outsiders who'd build cheap density and leave the city with traffic and no infrastructure. Vivian laughed once, with no amusement in it at all. You always become a public servant when you're cornered. Noah's face hardened. That land is the company's future. The company's future, Vivian said, does not belong to you alone. Elise listened to them and felt 2 truths align in a way that made her stomach sink. Noah might actually believe some of what he was saying. He had probably told himself this was stewardship, vision, necessary stealth in a dirty system. That was how respectable American corruption often worked, not cartoon greed. Rationalized entitlement, the conviction that rules were crude tools meant for less capable people, while men like him merely navigated complexity. What about the recordings? Elise asked. Monica looked at Noah sharply. You kept those? Noah said nothing. Vivian's eyes narrowed. What recordings? Elise opened the folder, withdrew the printout listing audio files, and handed it to her. Vivian read in silence. The lamp beside her painted deep lines around her mouth. You recorded negotiations? She asked without looking up. Noah spread his hands. Insurance. Against whom? Anybody who decided to get righteous after taking the deal. Vivian lifted her eyes. You stupid boy. The word boy did more damage than if she had called him a criminal. Noah flushed. Don't. No, Vivian said, voice low and cutting. You don't get dignity while I am discovering how many bombs you buried under this family's name. Monica stepped forward. This is all still containable. Elise turned to her. Containable for who? Monica met the question, and for the first time Elise saw the rawer thing under the campaign polish. Fear? Yes. But also exhaustion. For everyone, Monica said. You, your kids, the company, the hearing, every employee whose retirement is tied to Carter Horizons not collapsing because Noah couldn't keep his hands to himself and somebody exploited the footage. Exploited? Elise said softly. You mean revealed? Monica's jaw tightened. I mean weaponized. Don't be naive. I'm done being naive, Elise said. The room fell quiet again. She could hear the faint hiss of the gas fire, the distant clink of dishes somewhere in the back of the house. Elena and the kitchen staff moving through disaster with professional silence. Noah dragged a hand through his hair and turned away toward the windows. Outside, the pool lights made the water look black-blue and depthless. The video wasn't random, he said. Somebody had access to campaign schedules and building security. Monica thinks Ramirez's people got it. Monica corrected him immediately. I think Finch got it. Vivian looked up. Who is Finch? Noah answered before Monica could. Eli Finch. External counsel. He handled land use disputes, side negotiations, cleanup work. Cleanup work, Vivian repeated, disgust flattening the syllables. He's been pushing for bigger fees for months, Monica said. Then today he starts dodging my calls after the footage drops. That's not coincidence. Elise thought of the notepad in Noah's study. Finch underlined twice. What does Finch know? She asked. Noah turned back. Too much. That is not an answer. His self-control frayed. He knows about the interim acquisition vehicles, the off-book settlement talks, and the donors who wanted assurances before the rezoning package moved. Happy? Elise took that in. Donors, assurances, settlement talks. Every phrase had clean tailoring and dirty edges. Does he know about the affair? Monica laughed bitterly. At this point, I'd assume the landscaper knows about the affair. Vivian placed the printout on the desk with a precision that felt ceremonial. This is what happens, she said, looking not at Monica now but at Noah. When vanity and impatience masquerade as leadership. You built a structure of private leverage around a public process, and then you tied your own throat to it with an affair. Noah's eyes flashed. You think you're innocent? You taught me every lesson that got me here. The sentence hit the room like broken glass. Vivian went still in the dangerous way only truly disciplined people could. No, she said. I taught you never to leave fingerprints. Elise almost recoiled. There it was, the moral architecture beneath the family legend, spoken aloud by accident or exhaustion. Monica shut her eyes for 1 second. Noah stared at his mother, as if even he had not expected that much truth from her. Elise felt something inside her finalize. Whatever faint hope she had harbored, that this was simply Noah's rot, exceptional and removable, was gone. The disease was dynastic, not medical, she thought with a strange flicker of dark humor, but structural, passed down through etiquette, rewarded through succession, hidden beneath tasteful philanthropy and local newspaper profiles about civic vision. Then we're done protecting appearances, Elise said. All three turned toward her. She continued. You can argue over legal exposure, campaign strategy, and whether Finch or Ramirez or God himself leaked the video. I don't care tonight. I care about what happens to my children when this explodes again tomorrow. I care whether their names get dragged through hearings and search warrants and school gossip, because the adults in this family treat law like weather. Noah took a breath, tried for softness, and failed. Elise, I can fix the public side. You still think there are two sides. She shook her head. There aren't. Monica crossed her arms. What exactly do you want? Elise looked at her, then at Vivian, then at the man she had married. She had not planned this answer in the car. It arrived fully formed anyway, maybe because the night had stripped her down to the point where only clean lines remained. First, copies of everything, every acquisition file, every communication with Finch, every trust document related to Hollinger, every recording, tonight. Second, Noah moves out before sunrise and does not contact the kids until I decide how and when. Third, Vivian, if prosecutors or the press come, you do not use me as evidence of family unity. I will not stand beside anyone for optics. And fourth, if there is anything in this mess that rises from unethical to criminal, I hear it now, in this room, before somebody with a badge or a podcast tells my children first. Nobody spoke. Elise could feel her pulse in her neck, steady as a metronome. Outside, a breeze moved through the cypress, barely audible against the windows. Vivian was the first to respond. The second and third conditions are acceptable. Noah stared at her. Mother. She ignored him. The first will require review. No, Elise said. Copies. Tonight. Monica watched Vivian, measuring whether the Empress would blink. Vivian did not, but she shifted tactics. You understand, she said, that indiscriminate distribution of documents could worsen your position in divorce proceedings, custody matters, and any related litigation. Elise almost smiled. There it was, The first real threat wrapped as advice. "You understand," she replied, "that I'm no longer trying to preserve my position in your universe." Noah stepped forward again, but this time not aggressive, desperate. "Elise, listen to me. Finch is the immediate danger. If he has those recordings in the video, he can extort half the city. We need to know what he's doing before anybody starts making righteous decisions that blow up everything." She studied him. In another life, maybe earlier in this marriage, that appeal to practicality might have worked. But she heard the trap now. Join the emergency. Become useful. Delay the moral reckoning because a larger threat justifies temporary alliance. It was a very American seduction, especially among the powerful. "We," she said slowly, "are not a we tonight." Noah's face changed then, the anger draining just enough to reveal grief or self-pity, or both. "You'd burn me down." Elise thought of Ben asking whether she wanted Vivian to send his father to prison. Thought of Tessa saying adults use the word complicated when they meant scared. Thought of the woman she had been for years, smoothing, interpreting, waiting. "No," she said. "You built the fire. I'm just walking out of the house." That landed. Even Monica looked away. Vivian moved to the desk and opened a drawer with one small brass key she wore on a chain inside her jacket. From it she withdrew a slim folder of her own. Not Hollinger paperwork, trust summaries, signature authorities, a memo bearing the letterhead of Carter Horizon's outside counsel. She placed it beside Elise's folder. "There was one transfer attempt," Vivian said, "blocked before execution. Monica obtained access to summary pages through Noah's credentials. No funds moved. No guarantee was finalized. That is the legal truth as of this minute." Monica's face tightened. "I accessed what Noah authorized." "Yes," Vivian said. "And he was not authorized to authorize you." Elise absorbed the distinction. "Important. Maybe exculpatory in one direction, devastating in another. And criminal exposure?" she asked. Vivian's eyes flicked toward Noah, then back. "Potentially campaign finance. Potentially wire issues if anyone misrepresented ownership or intent in electronic filings. More likely civil war, reputational damage, board action, and perhaps an inquiry if Finch starts selling pieces of this to the right enemies. Not clean, not safe, but not yet handcuffs." Elise hated the relief that passed through her anyway. Noah was still the father of her children, however ruined. "Then you'd better find Finch before the morning does," she said. Vivian gave the slightest nod, as if acknowledging another executive in a negotiation. Monica checked her phone and blanched. "Too late for one thing," she said. Local 12 just posted that the DA's Public Integrity Unit declined to comment on questions related to campaign-linked land transactions. "Somebody's already feeding them." Noah swore. Vivian held out her hand. "Phone." Monica hesitated, then gave it to her. Vivian read the screen. The library seemed to contract around the glow in her face. "Elena," she called. And within seconds the house manager appeared in the doorway. "Have Robert bring the document scanner to the conference room. Now." She turned to Elise. "You'll have your copies in 10 minutes. Elise looked from Vivian to Noah to Monica, at the machinery reassembling itself under pressure. Faster than most governments, colder than most corporations. The family was adapting, not repenting. Good, she thought. Better to see it clearly. Better to know exactly what kind of night she had crossed into. And when Noah reached for her arm, lightly, as if maybe one touch could restore private language between them, she stepped back before his fingers landed. The refusal was so small in movement, and so complete in meaning, that Noah's hand hung in the air for a beat too long before he let it fall, and Elise saw, with a clarity almost cruel in its calmness, that he was not used to doors closing in real time. He was used to resistance as theater, not fact. Vivian broke the moment by turning to Elena. "Conference room," she repeated. And the house manager disappeared without a word, her shoes whispering across the hall runner. Monica reached for her own phone, found empty space, remembered Vivian had it, and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose as if trying to force her mind back into sequence. "I need that," she said. Vivian did not look up. "You'll have it when I know who else has this story by name, not speculation." Noah paced once toward the fireplace and back, jacketless, hollow-eyed, carrying the restless physical energy of a man who believed motion itself might become leverage if he generated enough of it. Elise watched him and found herself remembering another version of that pacing from years earlier, in a cramped rental kitchen with yellow walls and a crooked ceiling fan, when he had walked circles around a table, because he had just been offered his first city planning appointment and could not believe anyone in power had noticed him. Back then, she had loved his hunger because it seemed tethered to building something. She understood now how often Americans romanticized ambition when it was still wearing inexpensive shoes. In the conference room, Robert, the longtime driver who also somehow handled half the household's emergency logistics, was already setting up a compact high-speed scanner on the polished walnut table. The room's recessed lights were too bright after the library, flattening everyone into a more corporate reality. Architectural plans in silver frames lined one wall. A map of county development corridors covered another. This was where Carter decisions were made when they wanted the language of family, but the atmosphere of a boardroom. Vivian entered first and took the head seat without asking. Noah remained standing near the windows, Monica at the sideboard pouring herself water she barely drank, and Elise chose a chair halfway down the table where no one could mistake her for subordinate or ally. Robert fed the first batch of papers into the scanner with efficient silence. Each page pulled through with a dry mechanical hiss that somehow intensified the feeling that lives were being duplicated into evidence. Vivian placed Monica's phone face down in front of her and slid it across only after saying, "No deleting, no warning shots, no martyrdom texts to reporters." Monica caught it and gave her a look made of pure contempt. "You really do think everybody's your employee?" Vivian folded her hands. "No. Employees are easier." Noah laughed once, too sharp. "Can we skip the personality defects and address the actual problem?" "You are the actual problem," Vivian said. "One of several," Monica muttered. Noah wheeled toward her. "You want to do this now?" Monica set the water glass down so hard it clicked against the wood. "You really want to pretend I invented your appetite for shortcuts?" Their eyes locked, and in that locked stare, Elise saw something she had not fully let herself believe before. Not just an affair, partnership, mutual contamination. They had been dangerous together because each gave the other permission to be the worst version of competence. She could almost see the years of private understanding between them, the late-night texts, the budget meetings that lasted too long, the careful grievance sharing that always ripened into desire, because resentment was one of the most intimate currencies in American professional life. Elise turned away from them and toward Vivian. "Who is Eli Finch, really?" Vivian's gaze shifted to her, assessing, recalibrating. "A lawyer who learned the difference between legal and useful too early," she said. "He did municipal land use fights, negotiations with holdout owners, quiet problem resolution. He billed aggressively, cultivated secrets, and mistook proximity to power for belonging to it. You hired him. I approved a retainer after Noah pushed for him." Noah spread his hands. "Because he got results. Because he told you you were smarter than your enemies," Vivian said. "Men hear that, and hand over the keys." Robert cleared his throat softly from the scanner, the only sign he was hearing any of this. Though of course he was hearing all of it. He had probably heard the family's real history in fragments for 15 years, while waiting behind tinted glass. Elise asked, could Finch have had access to those recordings? Noah answered first. "Yes." Monica cut in. "Not all of them. Some were only on Noah's machine." Elise filed that away. "Some," which meant either Monica truly did not know the full archive, or wanted it to sound that way. Vivian noticed the same distinction. "How many recordings exist?" she asked. Noah rubbed his mouth, buying time. "A dozen. Maybe more." Vivian stared at him. "You don't know?" he bristled. "I wasn't cataloging them for memoir purposes," Monica said. 14 that I knew of. Maybe 16. Noah turned. "You went through my files?" "You literally used my name on half the schedules, Noah." "Enough?" Vivian snapped, and the word landed hard enough to halt both of them. Elise sat very still. The table under her hands was cool and perfectly polished, and she became oddly aware of the sensory detail as a survival tactic, the clean smell of paper warming under the scanner lamp, the distant citrus oil from whatever cleaning solution the staff used on the sideboard, the soft hum of the HVAC, pushing expensive cold air into a room full of badly managed heat. She thought of Ben and Tessa at home with Mara, and wondered whether the kitchen lights were still on, whether Tessa had finally fallen asleep on the couch, whether Ben was secretly checking every social platform despite promising not to. The ache of wanting to be with them and needing to be here stretched her thin. "What happens by morning?" Elise asked. Noah answered in campaign mode now. Voice clipped, analytical. A statement goes out. "Personal misconduct, consensual relationship. Apologize to family. Deny financial illegality. Suspend public events pending review." Monica added, "And if we're lucky, the affair becomes the whole story." Vivian looked at her as if she had suggested setting the house on fire to distract from termites. The affair cannot become the whole story when the phrase district attorney is already in circulation. Monica held her ground. "Then we narrow the second story before it starts breeding." "You sound tired," Vivian said. "I am tired," Monica shot back. "Tired of cleaning up men who confuse recklessness with leadership. That should have made Elise feel some savage feminine solidarity. It did not. Because Monica had not been cleaning up Noah. She had been co-authoring him. Still, the sentence struck Noah where vanity lived. "That's rich coming from you." Monica laughed, but there was a break in it now, a fracture finally widening under pressure. "Oh, I know exactly what I am. That's the difference between us." Vivian watched them the way judges watched two liars who accidentally started testifying against each other. "Then tell me what you are," she said. Monica's face went very still. For a moment, Elise thought she might refuse. Then she said, "I'm the person who kept the donor spreadsheets cleaner than the books deserved. I'm the person who knew which council staffer's brother needed a consulting contract, and which neighborhood coalition president only wanted his daughter placed on the conservancy board. I'm the person who turned Noah from a photogenic son-in-law with a zoning vocabulary into somebody people returned calls for." Noah's eyes flashed. "And in return?" Monica's smile was brittle and ugly. "In return, I got access, importance, the delusion that proximity to power eventually becomes power." She looked at Elise then, unexpectedly direct. "And then I got stupid." The honesty in that last sentence hung there because no one in the room wanted to touch it. Elise found herself asking, "Did you love him?" Noah looked almost offended by the question. Monica looked tired enough to tell the truth. "Sometimes," she said. "Mostly I loved not being invisible." The answer hit harder than a melodramatic confession would have. It was smaller, more adult, more humiliating for everyone. Elise sat back in her chair. She thought of all the women she knew in Pasadena and San Marino and Hancock Park, wives and staffers and consultants and daughters and second wives, moving through rooms arranged by male ambition, learning how to matter without ever being named the center. She did not forgive Monica, but she understood the hunger. Vivian said, "And now?" Monica looked down at the dark screen of her phone. "Now I'd like not to go to prison for a man who's already calculating his comeback." Noah took a step toward her. "You think I'm sacrificing you? Aren't you?" Monica asked. Silence answered first. Then Noah said, "I'm trying to triage." Elise almost smiled at the word choice. Even here, no hospitals in this story, she thought with a strange inward detachment. Yet men still loved the language of emergency when they wanted moral exemptions. Vivian said, "Then begin with the truth." Noah stared at his mother. "You first." Something changed in Vivian's expression. Not collapse. Not weakness. A narrowing of distance between public mask and whatever lived beneath it. She took off her bracelet and set it on the table, as if some small ornamental weight had become suddenly intolerable. 20 years ago, she said, Daniel Price handled quiet parcel assembly for your father. He also handled cash. Too much of it. Sloppy too early. We cut him loose when he started freelancing relationships we had paid to stabilize. He threatened to claim improprieties, said he had notes, conversations, names. Your father paid him to go away. Then Price vanished into New Mexico and sold his story in fragments to no one important enough to hurt us. Noah stared. Why didn't you ever tell me that? Vivian's eyes did not soften. Because I did not raise you to inherit my mistakes as a manual. Elise watched him absorb the word father as much as the content. His father had been dead 10 years, transformed by grief and money into one of those American patriarchs who became more coherent in memory than they ever were in life. To hear now that the old empire had used the same tactics under different stationery changed the room's moral weight. So, the text was bait, Elise said. Maybe, Vivian replied. Or maybe Finch found old files and decided to braid histories together. Monica went pale. If he has the Price material and Noah's recordings, he can make it look generational. Vivian turned to her. Because it is generational. Noah pushed away from the window and braced both hands on the back of a chair. So what? We confess to municipal Darwinism and hope the town appreciates our honesty? His voice cracked at the edges, and Elise heard at last the child inside the polished man. The boy trained to earn affection through utility and supremacy, terrified that exposure meant annihilation because no one had ever taught him another vocabulary for worth. It did not excuse him, but it made him suddenly, painfully legible. No, Vivian said. We separate survivable sins from prosecutable ones. We disclose what must be disclosed, cut away what can still be cut away, and find Finch before he decides to auction your private panic across 3 jurisdictions. You mean your panic, Noah said. Mine does not end careers, Vivian replied. It ends inheritances. The line hit with surgical precision. Noah went silent. Elise knew why. For all his public confidence, Noah had never truly possessed anything untouched by maternal permission. Not the board seat he wanted. Not the voting bloc he assumed would someday become his. Not even, perhaps, the moral authority he performed in front of cameras. The room had just shifted from scandal management to succession war. Robert removed a fresh stack of scanned copies and set them neatly into 2 folders, one for Vivian, one for Elise. The ordinariness of the gesture amid dynastic collapse felt surreal. Monica's phone buzzed against the table. This time Vivian nodded once, allowing it. Monica glanced down, read the message, and the blood left her face so abruptly, Elise thought for one fleeting second she might faint. But Monica only gripped the edge of the table harder. "What?" Noah demanded. Monica looked up. "Finch sent me a link." No one moved. "Open it," Vivian said. Monica hesitated. "It's a scheduled release page. 10 a.m. tomorrow. To 3 outlets and 1 county ethics blog." Noah was already crossing the room. "What's on it?" Monica swallowed. "A packet. The garage video. 2 recordings. Draft guarantor pages. And..." She stopped. Vivian's voice dropped colder. "And what?" Monica stared at the screen. "And a memo from 3 months ago outlining a fallback scenario if your health changed and Noah needed emergency control of trust voting authority before formal succession." The room went silent in a new and lethal way. Elise looked at Noah. He did not deny it fast enough. That delay told her more than words. "Emergency control," she repeated. "Your health?" Vivian's face became almost expressionless. "I had a cardiac workup in January. Routine. Clean." She shifted her gaze to Noah with something like disbelief, as if even now some lower baseline of him had surprised her. "You drafted contingency papers off that?" Noah's voice came out strained, defensive, then suddenly honest in the ugliest possible way. "Because every time I wait for permission, you remind me I'm temporary." Monica closed her eyes. Oh my God. Elise felt cold move through her from the inside out. Not because he had tried to kill his mother or anything so lurid, but because he had treated her mortality as a scheduling variable. A scenario, a line item in a control problem. "You were planning around your mother's possible death while sleeping with your treasurer and using secret vehicles to move land," Elise said. "Do you hear yourself?" Noah looked at her as if he wanted to say yes, and also as if he genuinely no longer knew where ordinary human disgust began. Vivian rose slowly from her chair. When she spoke, her voice was so controlled, it forced everyone else into stillness. "You will resign from the campaign before dawn. You will sign temporary removal from any pending trust-adjacent decisions. And if I learn you authored or approved that contingency memo in anticipation rather than prudence, I will not simply disinherit you. I will assist whoever comes asking." Noah laughed once, hollow and wrecked. "You already picked the company over me." "I picked survival over vanity," Vivian said. He straightened, some last hard piece of pride surfacing through the ruin. "Then maybe burn me and save your name. Isn't that the family tradition?" Elise stood. She could not bear another minute of the inheritance argument, swallowing the moral fact of what had happened to her children, her marriage, her life. "I'm leaving." All 3 of them turned. She picked up the copied folder Robert had prepared and slipped it into her bag beside the originals from Noah's study. The weight nearly pulled the strap from her shoulder. "Good," she thought. "Let truth have weight." Monica said quietly, "Elise, when this breaks tomorrow, they're going to come to you first. The sympathetic spouse. The mother. They'll try to make you the clean face of fallout. They can try." Vivian looked at her. "What will you say?" Elise thought of Ben's rigid jaw. Tessa's whisper. Mara telling her not to walk in like a managed woman. She thought of herself at 28, believing marriage to an ambitious man meant joining a project, not dissolving into one. "The truth," she said. "Whatever portion belongs to me." Noah made a small, exhausted sound. "And what portion is that?" She met his eyes one last time in that room. "That I stayed too long. That I confused silence with loyalty. That my children deserved better from both of us. And that if you want the rest of the story told kindly, you should have lived it differently." No one stopped her when she walked out. That was the strangest part. All that power, all that appetite for control, and still the hallway opened ahead of her empty and quiet, lit by sconces that turned the walls the color of old bone. In the foyer, Elena appeared as if conjured, holding Elise's coat, though she had not asked for it. Their eyes met. Elena said only, "Drive carefully." The kindness was so matter-of-fact it nearly undid her. Outside, the night had deepened into that California hour, when wealth looked most unreal and loneliness looked most expensive. The fountain at the center of the drive whispered into itself. Somewhere down the hill, a siren moved through another neighborhood's problems. Elise got into the car, locked the doors, and sat with both folders on the passenger seat. Her phone buzzed. "Mara," she answered on the first ring. "Talk to me." her sister said. Elise looked back once at the illuminated house where her marriage had just been converted into strategy, liability, and bloodline arithmetic. Then she started the engine. "Pack a bag for the kids," she said. "We're not sleeping there tonight." By the time she pulled into the driveway at Mara's bungalow in South Pasadena, the sky had shifted from hard black to the softer charcoal that comes before dawn, when streetlights still burn but birds are already negotiating morning in the trees. Mara had left the porch light on. It threw a warm trapezoid across the walk and caught the chipped blue paint on the railing, the terracotta pots with herbs gone leggy, the child's chalk marks from some neighbor kid still ghosting the front path. The house was small, lived in, imperfect, and Elise loved it with a force sharpened by contrast. No gates, no imported stone, no architectural lighting curated to flatter wealth, just a place where doors opened because people were expected, not managed. She cut the engine and sat for a moment with both hands still on the wheel, feeling the ache in her shoulders reveal itself now that motion had stopped. Her phone screen glowed with notifications, 2 voicemails from reporters, 7 texts from numbers she did not know. One from Vivian, "Do not speak publicly before 8 a.m. One from Noah, "Please tell me where the kids are." One from Ben, "We packed fast." Tessa forgot her charger and is blaming capitalism. Even through exhaustion, Elise felt a small, startled laugh break loose in her chest. She picked up the folders, got out, and went inside. Mara was in the kitchen barefoot, hair half fallen from its clip, making scrambled eggs at 2:47 inches the morning, as if late-night disaster required protein before interpretation. The kitchen smelled like butter, coffee grounds, and the citrus dish soap Mara always bought because it reminded her of their grandmother's apartment. Ben sat at the table in yesterday's hoodie, long legs stretched out, eyes red from fatigue and too much information. Tessa was curled on the window seat under a quilt, asleep at last with one arm tucked under her face and her phone charging beside her from a cable Mara must have found in a drawer. Elise stood in the doorway for 1 second and let the domestic ordinariness hit her. The clink of Mara's spatula against the pan, the refrigerator's low hum, Ben reaching automatically for a fork even though the eggs were not done yet. Civilization after theater. "You look like hell," Mara said without turning. "Thank you," Elise answered. "Sit," Mara replied, "before you become the kind of woman who faints from adrenaline and then lies about it for 40 years. Elise set the folders on the table and lowered herself into the chair across from Ben. He looked at the documents as if they might start speaking on their own. "How bad?" he asked. He was trying for adult tone again. She could see the effort in the set of his jaw, the way he avoided glancing toward his sleeping sister, as if not looking directly at vulnerability would help protect it. Elise rubbed the heel of one hand over her sternum. "Bad enough," she said. "Not simple enough to explain in one sentence." Ben nodded like he expected that. "Is Dad getting arrested?" Mara snorted softly at the stove. Elise answered with care. "Not tonight. Maybe not at all. But there are people who may want leverage, and there are documents that shouldn't exist, and your father made choices that have consequences beyond the affair." Ben stared at the tabletop. The wood was scarred with years of hot mugs and homework, and one black burn mark from when Mara had set down a cast-iron skillet without thinking. He traced that mark with one finger. "I used to think rich people just had better versions of normal problems," he said. "Now it seems like they just have weirder crimes." Mara slid eggs onto 3 plates. "That," she said, setting one in front of him, "is the most American thing anybody's said all night." Elise almost smiled, then didn't, because Noah's text was still bright in her mind. "Please tell me where the kids are," as if logistics were intimacy, as if knowing location counted as care. She unlocked her phone and typed one line back. "They are safe. Do not contact them until I say so." She stared at it for a moment, then sent it. Immediately the phone buzzed with his reply. "Elise, please." She turned the device face down. Mara placed a plate in front of her and finally looked directly into her face. "What did Vivian do?" she asked. Not say, not want, do. Mara understood the physics of families. Elise told them more than she had intended. Not everything, because Tessa was sleeping, and because some truths needed quieter rooms, but enough. The shell companies, the trust summaries, the recordings, Finch and the scheduled release, Vivian threatening inheritance, Noah drafting contingency language around his mother's health. As she spoke, she felt the night become more real by passing through language, details hardening instead of dissolving. Ben stopped eating halfway through. Mara leaned both palms on the counter and swore under her breath 3 separate times in 3 separate emotional registers. When Elise finished, the kitchen fell silent, except for a faucet somewhere in the bathroom dripping every few seconds. Ben said, very softly, He planned for Grandma to die? No, Elise said quickly, then slowed herself because false kindness would only grow teeth later. Not like that. Not in a murder way. In a control way. In a paperwork way. Ben stared at her. That's not better. No, she thought. It wasn't. It was perhaps more recognizable, which made it worse. Tessa stirred on the window seat, opened her eyes halfway, and blinked at all of them through sleep. Did anyone die? She murmured. Mara crossed over, crouched beside her, and brushed hair back from her face. No, baby. Tessa accepted that with the irrational faith available only to the exhausted and drifted down again. Elise watched her and felt the first true edge of the next decision. Morning would come, and with it reporters at gates, school rumors, formal statements, maybe the leak at 10, if Finch followed through. She could try to hide the children completely, cut them off from phones, keep them home. But Ben was too old for imposed silence and Tessa too sharp to mistake secrecy for protection. The instinct to shield had to compete with the duty to tell the truth. That was parenthood in disaster. Not building walls, choosing which windows to open yourself before somebody else shattered them. They can't go to school tomorrow, Mara said. Today, Ben corrected automatically, glancing toward the dark window where the first faint gray had begun to collect behind the lemon tree. Mara pointed the spatula at him. You know what I mean. Elise nodded. No school. Ben set down his fork. And then what? We just hide while Dad's face is on the news and people make TikToks? His anger had returned, cleaner now, less panicked. Because that's not protecting us. That's just letting everyone else write it first. Elise looked at him, really looked, and saw not a child demanding agency for ego but a son asking not to be infantilized by catastrophe. It hurt because it required her to let go of one more illusion, the one where she could still control timing. You're right, she said. Then we tell you first. All of it you're old enough to know. Ben held her gaze, almost startled by agreement. Mara leaned back against the counter and folded her arms, her expression shifting from combative to wary. Maybe not all of it before sunrise. No, Elise said, surprising even herself with the steadiness in her voice. Before somebody else does. She rose, took the folders, and carried them into the narrow living room, where the lamp by the couch threw a circle of honey-colored light across stacks of books, a basket of mismatched blankets, and a framed photo of Elise and Mara at 14 and 16, sunburned and grinning on a beach neither of them could now afford on their own. Ben followed. Mara tucked the quilt more securely around Tessa, then came to, moving more quietly now. Elise sat on the couch and laid out only a few pages. Not the most corrosive. Not yet. The note from Monica. The trust summary. The scheduled release screenshot Monica had texted from her own phone to Vivian's printer, and which Elise had snapped before leaving. She explained what a trust was, what collateral meant, how land got bought through entities, how adults with money often convinced themselves technical legality and actual decency were interchangeable. Ben asked sharp questions. Tessa woke fully halfway through and listened under the quilt, hugging a pillow to her stomach. When Elise said, "Your father had a relationship with Monica for some time," Tessa's face did not crumple this time. It flattened, went still, which was worse. She asked, "Did everybody know except us?" Elise did not answer immediately, because honesty had gradations and cruelty wore some of them. "I think some people suspected," she said. "I suspected more than I admitted." Tessa looked down at the seam of the pillowcase, rubbing it between thumb and finger. "That's the part I hate," she whispered. "Not just him. The part where everybody can tell, and you're the last one to know." Ben turned toward his sister, and for once he had no sarcastic correction, no joke, no shield. Elise reached for Tessa's ankle under the quilt and held it gently. "I know." She thought of herself at 36, finding a receipt in Noah's jacket from a restaurant in Santa Barbara on a day he had claimed to be in Sacramento. Of the sharp cold certainty that had risen then, and the immediate smoother voice in her own mind that had said, "Don't start what you can't finish." Fear could make cowards of decent people long before it made villains of them. Mara, who had been silent for several minutes, finally said, "So what's your move?" Elise looked at her sister, then at the children. The question was not, what's the family move? What's Vivian's containment strategy? What's Noah's legal exposure? Just hers. That simple realignment nearly made her dizzy. "At 8, she said, I call a lawyer. Mine, not theirs. Then I call the school counselor before any of this gets there first. Then I decide whether I make a statement before Finch's packet goes live." Ben frowned. "Why would you say anything? Won't that just feed it?" Mara answered before Elise could. "Silence gets filled by the loudest liar in the room." Ben absorbed that. Tessa asked, "What kind of statement?" Elise hadn't fully formed it yet, but the shape of it lived in her already. Not defense, not performance. Not the old spouse posture of standing next to a disgraced man in sensible colors, while he apologized for disappointing everyone except the people he actually betrayed. Something short, she said. Something that protects you without pretending I know everything. Something that doesn't let them use me as proof that this is private and handled. Her phone lit again, this time Vivian calling. Mara made a face. Absolutely not. Elise hesitated, then answered and put it on speaker. What? Vivian's voice came through, precise as ever, but thinner now, as if the night had finally taxed even her. The release has moved up, 8:30, not 10. Finch is accelerating. Mara muttered something unprintable. Elise said, Then I assume your team is already trying to injunct it. Of course, but courts move at court speed, and scandal moves faster. A pause. Noah has agreed to suspend his campaign as of 6 a.m. Elise let that land without comment. Agreed. As if he had negotiated with gravity, Vivian continued. If you intend to speak publicly, do it before the packet frames you. I know. Another pause, longer this time. Then Vivian said, For what it is worth, the children should remain out of sight today. The suggestion would have sounded strategic from anyone else. From Vivian, it almost sounded like concern, which was more destabilizing. Elise answered carefully. They're with me. Good. The line clicked off. Mara stared at the phone as though it might still contain poison. I hate that woman, she said. Ben, unexpectedly, said, I kind of get her now. All three females in the room looked at him. He shrugged, uncomfortable under the attention. Not like as a person, but she's not pretending, Tessa said. That doesn't make her good. No, Ben agreed. Just honest in a scary way. Elise watched her children testing adult distinctions in real time. It felt like standing on a shoreline while a tide took sand out from under her feet, grain by grain. There would be no return to innocence after this. The best she could do was make sure cynicism did not become the only inheritance. At 5:38, Mara forced everyone to change clothes, brush teeth, and splash water on their faces because, in her words, apocalypse or not, you think clearer when you don't smell like dread. By 6:15, the house had that strange early morning overstimulation of crisis. Coffee brewing, phones charging, television muted with closed captions crawling along the bottom, group texts multiplying faster than anyone could read them. A local station ran aerial footage of Vivian's house and the Civic Center with the Keyron campaign in chaos. Then, at 6:22, Noah appeared live at a podium outside some hotel ballroom, flanked by no family, no Monica, no Vivian, just two grim campaign staffers and a forest of microphones. He looked older by 10 years and somehow still coached within an inch of his life. Elise stood beside the TV with her coffee turning cold in her hand, while Ben and Tessa watched from the couch, and Mara sat on the armrest like a coiled wire. Noah began exactly as predicted. Personal failings, deep regret, temporary suspension, commitment to full cooperation with any review of campaign and business matters. He did not say Monica's name. He did not say Elise's. He did not say trust. When a reporter shouted, "Did you attempt to leverage family assets without authorization?" he answered, "I have always acted in what I believed were the best interests of the project and the community." Mara barked a laugh. Ben said, "That means yes." Tessa stared at the screen with her lips pressed tight together. Noah went on, voice careful, hands controlled, every sentence engineered to sound accountable while yielding nothing. Elise could almost hear the consultants behind it. Then a reporter from one of the local public radio stations asked, "Has your wife been informed about the financial allegations?" Noah paused. It was tiny. Most viewers wouldn't see it. Elise did. So did Mara. In that pause, Noah had a choice. He could say, "My wife and children are private citizens, and I won't involve them." Or he could leave the door open. He chose the door. "My family is aware that this is a complicated situation," he said. Complicated. Elise closed her eyes for one brief second. There it was again, the word adults used when they meant fear, self-excuse, or both. When she opened them, Ben was already looking at her, fury bright and naked. "Do it," he said. Mara nodded. Tessa whispered, "Before he says more." Elise set down her cup. The room went very quiet inside her, not outside. Outside there were birds, captions, the coffee maker clicking off, a truck shifting gears on the street. But inside, a chamber of stillness opened. She took her phone, found the number of a family law attorney she had met once at a fundraiser years ago and had privately thought seemed too blunt to be successful. Now bluntness sounded like salvation. The attorney answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. Within 12 minutes, Elise had counsel, a promise of an emergency meeting by video, and one piece of advice she had already known before hearing it. Do not let their statement become your silence. So she sat at Mara's dining table with the morning light finally entering through lace curtains and striping the worn wood, while Mara hovered with a legal pad and the children pretended not to listen while hearing every word, and she wrote the first true public sentence of her adult life. She did not overpolish it. She did not ask Vivian's approval. She did not imagine Noah reading it and feeling things. She wrote for the part of herself that had gone missing in 12 years of adaptation and for the two kids in the next room who needed one adult to sound like reality instead of strategy. When she finished, she read it aloud. Last night I learned information about my husband's conduct, both personal and financial, that I cannot defend and will not minimize. My focus is on protecting my children and cooperating with appropriate legal processes as facts become clear. I ask for privacy for my family, but I will not be used to suggest that this matter is merely private. The room held still after she finished. Mara said, "That's clean." Ben nodded once. Tessa looked at her mother with a strange, fragile new expression. Not relief exactly, but recognition, as if one language in the family had finally been replaced with another. Etsu, fire, Elise posted it. Etsu, fire. Elise posted it. For 3 seconds, nothing happened except the ordinary morning sounds of a small house trying to remain itself. The refrigerator compressor kicking on, a dove landing hard on the roof, Mara rinsing a mug in the sink with more force than necessary. Then the world came back at speed. Her phone vibrated once, then again, then in a chain so constant it became a physical texture in her hand. Messages stacked over one another faster than she could read them. A producer from a local station asking for comment. A woman from the school board offering support in this difficult season, which already sounded like a quote from a district memo. 2 numbers she didn't know sending versions of, "You are brave." One old college friend writing only, "Finally." That one Elise stared at for a beat longer than the others, because beneath its warmth sat indictment. Finally, as in, this was not the first moment she could have chosen clarity. Ben's phone started going off too. He looked at the screen, then at his mother. "Everybody saw it," Tessa whispered. "Good," and pulled the quilt higher around her shoulders even though the room was warming with daylight. On the muted television, Noah's live statement had already vanished beneath breaking news graphics and a panel of local commentators talking over one another. Elise's own words now appeared in a banner under her photo, stripped to the sharpest clause. "Cannot defend and will not minimize." Mara let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, drying her hands on a dish towel, "you just made it impossible for them to staple you to his apology." Elise should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt strangely level, as if one essential chemical had burned out during the night and left only function. She sat back in the dining chair, wood pressing against her spine, and watched the morning light strengthen across Mara's floorboards. Dust lifted in it. The lemon tree outside the window moved in a faint breeze. In another life, she would have found the beauty unbearable. In this one, it felt instructional. The world did not pause for private collapse. It simply illuminated it more clearly. Her attorney called at 7:19. A woman named Dana Keene with a voice like sharpened paper and no detectable patience for sentimental self-destruction. Elise stepped into Mara's tiny front room to take the call, though everyone could still hear enough to know its shape. Dana had already seen the statement. "Good," she said. "Now the basics. You do not go back to the house alone. You do not sign anything. You do not agree to any informal family arrangement that is somehow not yet written down, but definitely for your own good." Elise looked out through the lace curtain at the quiet street, where a man in running shorts trotted past with a golden retriever that had no idea a dynasty was collapsing 2 blocks over in the news cycle. "That last one sounds specific." "It is America," Dana replied. "Rich families always discover the value of informality when a wife becomes inconveniently informed." Elise almost laughed. The attorney continued. "I'm also looping in a white-collar colleague, not because you're the target right now, but because you've touched documents and you need clean advice." "Do I need to give them to someone?" "Eventually, maybe. Not before we inventory what you have and how you got it." Elise absorbed that, the shift from moral panic to procedural reality. It was both comforting and nauseating. Dana set a video meeting for 8:30, then asked the question Elise had been postponing inside herself. "Do you want to separate immediately?" "Want," as though desire still had clean edges. Elise looked toward the dining room, where Ben sat hunched over his phone, and Tessa leaned against Mara's side on the couch, exhausted enough to accept comfort without arguing. She thought of Noah's pause at the podium before saying complicated, and of his hand reaching for her arm in Vivian's conference room, not out of tenderness but instinct. "Yes," she said. The word landed with less drama than she might once have imagined. It sounded administrative, binding anyway. When she returned to the dining room, Ben looked up first. Was that the divorce lawyer? Children in wealthy communities learned this language early, as if contract law were part of adolescence. Yes, Elise said. Tessa's face tightened, but she didn't cry. Mara handed Elise fresh coffee and said, "Drink it while it's hot for once in your life." At 7:41, Monica called. Elise almost ignored it. Then she thought of scheduled releases, old files, and the habit of disaster to hide its last sharp object in the least welcome voice. She stepped into the hall and answered. Monica did not say hello. Her voice sounded scraped raw, as if she had spent the last hour arguing in cars and bathrooms and maybe finally with herself. "Finch has moved again," she said. "There's a second packet." Elise leaned against the wall by the coat hooks, staring at Mara's framed postcard print of the Arroyo Seco. "What's in it?" "Board minutes excerpts, selectively edited." Enough to imply Vivian knew more than she's admitting. Did she? A pause. Not exactly. Not cleanly. She knew the Hollinger assembly was being pushed aggressively. She did not know Noah and I were using her trust summaries as leverage language. Elise closed her eyes for 1 second. "Why are you telling me this?" Monica exhaled, a sound shaped by fatigue and disgust. "Because Noah is still trying to save a version of himself that doesn't exist anymore. Vivian is trying to save the company, and Finch is trying to monetize everybody. You're the only one who may still care what actually happened." That was almost a compliment. It felt like one of those late revelations that come too late to change character, but just in time to expose it. "And what did actually happen?" Elise asked. Monica spoke more slowly now. "Noah wanted control, not just of the campaign, of succession, of proving he wasn't temporary. Hollinger was supposed to be the project that made him indispensable before Vivian could keep dangling the future forever. I helped because I thought if he won, some part of that win would belong to me." Her laugh was dry and ugly. "Turns out men are very willing to share risk, less eager with power." Elise said nothing. The silence lengthened until Monica filled it. "There's something else. Finch didn't just steal from Noah's files. He got into my cloud backup. The garage footage wasn't from an enemy campaign. It came from my own security subscription at the hotel. I had the clip because I thought someday I might need proof Noah wasn't imagining us." Elise felt a cold pulse behind her ribs. Not shock anymore. Something more mature and more corrosive. The recognition that every person in this story had built backup stories against the others. Love turned into leverage at the exact moment it stopped trusting itself to be remembered honestly. "Why keep it?" Elise asked. "Because invisible women hoard evidence," Monica said. "We learn to." Then, after a beat, "I'm meeting the DA at 11. Elise went absolutely still. "Are you cooperating?" "I'm protecting myself. That means yes." "It means," Monica said, and now her voice finally cracked. Just once. "I am done being the smartest person in the room, only when the room needs someone to blame." Before Elise could answer, Monica added, "Tell your kids none of this is their shame," and hung up. Elise stood in the narrow hall holding the silent phone. None of this is their shame. True. Also impossible. Shame traveled through families like smoke. It ignored innocence and settled where it could cling. When she went back into the dining room, Mara took one look at her face and said, "What?" Elise told them enough. Not Monica's private ache. Not the whole anatomy of self-preservation. But enough. Finch had more. Monica was going to prosecutors. The circle was tightening. Ben let out a long breath through his teeth. "So, that's it then?" "No," Elise said. "Not it. Just the next thing." He stood, suddenly unable to stay seated, and paced to the front window and back in 3 quick strides that were so much like Noah's old nervous pacing, it made Elise's throat tighten. Ben stopped mid-step, as if he felt the inheritance in his own body and hated it. "I don't want to turn into him." The sentence came out low, not performative, not melodramatic, just frightened. Elise rose immediately and crossed to him. "You won't," she said. He gave her a look that was both teenage skepticism and genuine plea. "How do you know?" She put one hand on his cheek, something she had done less often as he got older, and Noah made masculinity sound like distance. "Because you're asking that question now," she said. "Because you feel sick at the right things. Because being his son is not the same as becoming his copy." Ben swallowed hard. His eyes shone once, then he looked away before tears could become visible fact. On the couch, Tessa said, almost to herself, "I don't want my whole life to be before this and after this," Mara answered from the kitchen doorway. "It won't be your whole life. It'll just be one of the big, ugly hinges." Tessa considered that. That's a terrible metaphor. It's an accurate metaphor, Mara said. At 8:12, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze for a split second before Mara checked the camera. A woman in a navy suit, holding a portfolio, silver hair pinned back in a familiar twist. Elena. Of course, Vivian would send emissaries who knew how to ring a bell without making it sound like an intrusion. Mara looked at Elise. Want me to pretend we're not home? Elise thought about it, then shook her head. No, I'm done hiding behind other people's manners. Elena entered with the same composed face she had worn at Vivian's house, but her eyes softened when they flicked briefly toward the children. Miss Carter, she said, offering the portfolio. Mrs. Carter asked that these be delivered directly. They include the formal notice of Mr. Carter's campaign suspension, temporary relinquishment of authority over pending Hollinger entities, and confirmation that no representative of the family office is to contact the children's schools without your permission. Elise took the packet. Heavy cream paper. Signatures. Corporate language doing emergency surgery on blood ties. Thank you, she said. Elena hesitated. Then, quietly enough that it almost vanished beneath the house sounds. For what it's worth, your statement was the first honest thing any of them have said in years. Mara's eyebrows lifted. Elena gave the faintest apologetic tilt of the head, professional boundaries reassembling. There is one more item. She withdrew a smaller envelope. From Mrs. Carter personally. Then she left before anyone could ask her to stay. The envelope was thick, unsealed. Inside was a handwritten note in Vivian's severe slanted script and a cashier's check with more zeros than Elise had ever held in her own name. The note was only 4 lines. For temporary housing, security, and independent counsel. This is not charity. It is insulation. Do not mistake one for the other. V. Mara read over Elise's shoulder and said, I despise that I respect her penmanship. Elise looked at the check, then at the children. Money was never just money in this family. It was position, gravity, permission, a corridor with obligations built into the walls. Yet refusing it on principle might expose Ben and Tessa to the very machinery she was trying to step outside. Saving one thing must fracture another, she thought. Not as a slogan, but as the geometry of consequences. If she took Vivian's insulation, she preserved immediate safety and accepted another thread tying her to the family she was leaving. If she rejected it, she gained moral clarity and perhaps risked practical vulnerability. Dana Keene solved the dilemma for her at 8:31 on the video call. Take it, the attorney said after reviewing the note and the documents. Dana's face on Mara's laptop was sharp-featured, unsentimental, framed by a bookshelf full of legal treatises, and one thriving houseplant that seemed to mock the rest of the room's austerity. Segregate the funds, document receipt, spend only on transitional necessities, and do not verbally thank anyone in a way that implies terms. Wealthy people weaponize gratitude. We'll weaponize records instead, Mara mouthed. I love her. Ben, listening from the hallway, looked faintly impressed. The meeting lasted 43 minutes. By the end, Elise had a list. Emergency petition for exclusive temporary use of the marital residence deferred until the security situation was assessed. Preservation of all electronic evidence, counseling resources for the children, private security consultation, not through Carter channels, and a clear instruction not to speak to any investigator without counsel present, even if she believed herself morally pure. Purity, Dana said dryly, is for memoirs and church. We are dealing with process. After the call, the house fell into a different kind of quiet. Not the stunned silence of the night before, a working quiet. Mara made another pot of coffee. Ben finally showered. Tessa sat at the table coloring in the margins of an old crossword with 3 felt-tip pens, because apparently 14-year-old nervous systems sometimes chose kindergarten as a coping mechanism. Elise stood in the spare bedroom where Mara had made up a bed for her with washed linen sheets and one lamp that leaned slightly left, and she opened the closet to hang the coat she still wore like a costume from last night's life. When she reached into the pocket, her fingers found something small and hard. Noah's wedding band. She stared at it in her palm. He must have slipped it into her coat at some point in the house before the hearing, or maybe days ago. Or maybe she had taken it off him unconsciously in some argument and forgotten. No. She realized after a second. It was her own ring, the thin platinum band she had stopped noticing years ago because it had become part of her hand. Sometime between the council chamber and Mara's kitchen, it had fallen into the coat pocket. She sat down on the edge of the narrow bed and held it up to the light. Plain, elegant, expensive, intentionally understated. So much of her marriage had looked like that from the outside. She thought about putting it back on out of habit, then laughed once at herself, low and astonished. Habit was not holiness. She set the ring on the nightstand. Through the thin wall, she could hear Mara and Tessa arguing mildly about whether toast counted as lunch, the clatter of a knife against a cutting board, Ben answering a text with more restraint than he would have had yesterday. Life, rearranging itself in awkward, unglamorous increments. Her phone buzzed once more. Noah. Not a call this time. A message. I don't expect forgiveness. I do need to see the kids when they're ready. And Elise Finch is missing. She read it twice. Then a third time. Missing could mean fleeing, hiding, lawyered up. It could mean found in some motel or airport or marina by afternoon. It could also mean something uglier, but she refused that direction. No new melodrama. Enough already. She typed back only one line. We will arrange contact through counsel. As for Finch, tell the truth faster than he sells his version. She sent it, then turned the phone face down beside the ring. Outside the spare room window, the neighborhood was fully awake now. A mail truck rolled past. Sprinklers ticked across somebody's front lawn. Two little girls in backpacks walked down the opposite sidewalk holding hands, arguing about a science project with the grave sincerity of children, whose world had not yet taught them how much adults could damage and survive at the same time. Elise watched them until they disappeared past the jacaranda at the corner. Then she stood, squared her shoulders, and went back into the house that was not hers but, for now, held the only version of family she trusted. The future ahead of her did not look clean. It looked legal and public and mean. It looked like explaining things twice, once to the courts and once to children. It looked like losing the home she had decorated, the surname she had organized herself around, the illusion that intelligence could save people from appetite. It also looked like air, hard to breathe at first, still air, and when Tessa looked up from the kitchen table as Elise entered and asked, with the plain, selfish hope only a child is allowed, "Are you staying here with us tonight too?" Elise answered without hesitation. Yes. That yes cost a marriage, a house, a standing in a very narrow world, and maybe whatever fragile truce remained with Vivian Carter. It also saved something she had nearly misplaced beyond recovery: the right to belong to her own life.